obviously, and my next question was going to be, who wrote most of the music, and obviously I should say that obviously you are the officially like the bassist, the vocalist in Raven, and your brother Mark.
Hey, don't
Gallagher.
forget the tuba. I play the tuba and all.
Exactly.
I've got many recordings. Usually underwater, however. Who wrote the songs? It was basically really all three of us. I mean, looking at something like that, I mean, Mark would come up with stuff like "Rock Until You Drop" was basically all him. "Don't Need Your Money" was pretty much him and Rob. "Time to the Airways" was a lot of me. "Lambs of Slaughter" was all three of us. It really depended, you know, and as it went on, we all had more of a Vulcan mind meld, and it was kind of hard to tell who did what, you know.
As a matter of fact, "Don't Need Your Money," it sounds to me like it's so like somebody was dating somebody's some wealthy girl or something at the time.
Well, that was Rob. I mean, we came up with, you know, we obviously been writing some material, and he came in, he had this whole Vegas vibe almost, you know. It was like this whole American type of slant on stuff, and it was cool, and it was just great. He wrote a lot of the lyrics in the early days, you know, like Hard Ride, I think I wrote the lyrics. Hell Patrol was Rob. Don't Need Your Money was Rob. Over the Top was me. For the Future was me. Rock Until You Drop was Mark. He wrote some of the lyrics back then too. And you know, it was a great melting pot. Someone would have an idea, a rehearsal hall, and we'd just all jump on it and just add to it and build it up. Just build it right through.
What I, as a fan, liked about it is it has a certain amount of aggression to it, but there's always a little bit of humor in your music and the lyrics. Sometimes it's a little bit of tongue in cheek, which is fantastic.
Yeah, there's you could definitely tell that we weren't taking ourselves too seriously. And the other thing is you can hear in there as well. I mean, a lot of, especially then, a lot of the heavy music had a lot of repetition in it. And we were too hyper to have that kind of repetition. A lot of bands would start and play the riff 8 times before the vocals come in. And we'd play like twice and just get to the point, you know. So even though we weren't punk fans per se, there was a lot of that kind of attitude must have distilled into us, you know.
Yeah, it can be heard. I think we should play something from Rock Until You Drop right now. What would you recommend? Which song? Or
I'm going to play something a little different, I think, here. Let's pop this out here. Because after we did this album, we did a Radio 1 session, and they're on this special edition here. If you pull out track number 15, we've got a different version of Lambs to the Slaughter, which is a cool tune that we still play live. And this was quite an event for us because we actually went down to London and went to a real studio.
That had to have been exciting.
Well, it was real exciting. I'll tell you all about it in a minute. There was all kinds of things happened on our way to get down to there. We nearly didn't make it at all.
On WMUC FM, College Park, Maryland. We're up here with John, bass player, singer for Raven, and Zach is going to continue asking questions. Mike might hop in. So we're at what, 1982?
We're roughly about there.
Time travel. It's an amazing thing.
Exactly. Well, you were mentioning right before we played that track that there was an interesting story about going to London for the first time to record in a real studio.
Yeah, well, I think I was probably still working a day job at that point, and my brother and Rob were going to go down to London and do an interview with Radio 1. And then they were going to come back, and 3 days later we were all going to go down and do this Radio 1 session in a real studio. Very prestigious. Against the John Peel guy, he had this show, and they'd put up a session, and all the hot bands at the time were doing it, so it was a great thing to get on it. So they went down to do this interview, and there was a multi-car pile-up on the main highway going down to London, and Rob had his head smashed through the glass window, and Mark burst his trousers. He had all these Brian Slagle, the new heavy metal review. He had stickers holding his pants together, and they were down there. They stayed at some guy that used to be in the Shadows, actually, Bruce Welsh. I saw his name mentioned on here. Stayed at his house down in London for 2 days, and it was like, how are we going to get down? Because one of our roadies had went down with him, the one that drove, and I didn't drive. So we got my father, and me and him got the equipment, and the boss of Neat Records said to me dad, whose name's John, he said, well, John, you'd better make some sandwiches and bring it down, because them lads are getting hungry. And he just looked at him and put his hand out like, give me money. You cheap son of a... So we got in a van, loaded the gear, and it was the worst fog you've ever seen. Like every bad movie about England, and it took like 10 hours to drive 200 miles. So we were toast, they were toast, and we were all fried. We went in the studio, and it looked like Beirut on the outside. It was like the worst place. Oh God! And you knock on the door, and it was all a facade. You walk in, and it was state of the art, like
Wow.
an amazing studio. And they just made it look like hell on the outside. It's really strange. I had an atrium down the side with plants you could walk down. The recording was maybe 60 foot by 40 foot.
Kind of like a sleeper
That
studio.
was pretty cool. So we spent a whole day there and did, I think it was 3 or 4 tracks. Yeah, 3 tracks. No, 4 tracks, you know. And we realised, well, we've got to go back to the old studio and do a new album. Yeah. But we very quickly got in the studio, and I mean, a lot of people have difficulty doing the second album because the first album they've been playing it live forever, and and then they have to start from scratch. Well, we as a band hadn't been together that long before we did the first album, so we just wrote another bunch of songs right on the spur of the moment and went in and recorded the second album called Wiped Out, which was done. Actually, the songs for Wiped Out and the songs that were on the Crash Bang Wallop EP were all done in maybe 7 days.
Oh, it's fast.
And mixed. We literally just played them live, and there was a little bit of overdubbed rhythm guitar or lead guitar or what have you. And we wrote some of the songs right there in the studio. Like, there's a song called To the Limit of the Top. We went right up until it gets quiet. We stopped and said, what do we do next? So we sat for 10 minutes, thought what we were going to do, came up with the ideas, went back and record, finished the song off, wrote the lyrics, and put them on. There it was. There was a song.
Was that still also the Neat Records guys producing that? Like Keith
Well, there was
Nichol,
a different guy in there then. That was Keith Nichol, he'd been playing in a band, funnily enough, called Oasis at the time, and they were very West Coast American influenced, what have you, Eagle-ish, I guess. All the bands in Newcastle wanted to be in the Eagles so bad, which is why I still have an aversion of the Eagles, poor guys, because of that. So he came in and, you know, very nervous. This was his big deal. He had to produce this bunch of nutcases. And I remember getting a Lexicon 224 reverb unit, which is probably pretty pedestrian now, but then it looked like something off the Spaceship Enterprise or something. It was just, you know, the slider controls, and he was going crazy trying to get this thing together. And I had a bunch of bass pedals. We did all these intricate bass pedal parts on the first song, Fast and Speed of Light. You can't even hear them in the mix. I don't know where they went. The other thing that sucks about that is that album, they made us do 2 mixes. We always wanted a safety mix. Again, this is for you technophobes. It's definitely before Pro Tools, recorded live onto a 2-inch tape machine that had 16 tracks. The machine looked like a gigantic refrigerator. It was so ridiculous.
massive reels.
It's the machine that was out at Trident Studios originally that they recorded Ziggy Stardust and Spiders of Mars on. And the tape machine has a tape head. The tape head was literally ground down from so many years of use. It was like, unbelievable. And you know, you'd run a few passes and there'd be all this oxide all over the machine. It
Wow.
was just carving the tape up.
So that means there's an alternate mix of Wiped Out out
Yeah,
there
the
somewhere.
real mix. You did a mix because again the mix was like a performance. You had, like, you know, if there was intricate stuff, you'd set the drums up, and the engineer would do some moves and go, okay, at this point, click this button off, leave it off, and when it comes to the guitar solo, pop it on, and when it finishes, pop it off. Otherwise, you'll have noise and stuff at either end. If they didn't clean up the tape, you'd be putting stuff in and off, or bringing faders up and down. And on some of the more intricate stuff, you'd have like 4 or 5 people over the desk hitting buttons and pushing stuff, and it had to be just right. So you do it, and it was like, that's okay, let's try it again. And inevitably, the second take would be so much better, always.